We will now kneel.
Miss Cinema, no.
You have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
The fact is, Joe Biden performed worse in the early states where voters saw a lot of him, and that's just a fact. Iowa,
Why is that? Why is that?
Look, I spoke before or after Joe Biden half a dozen times. And the fact is, when he came off that stage, you know what people were not saying? That guy has the energy, the vigor, and
then all of a sudden he developed it. You're missing the most important thing, Andrew. The early states are full of white liberals. They don't like Joe. Then when we moved to real Democrats, African Americans in the South, they loved him and he steamrolled everybody. Because in my party, the heart and soul of the party are people of color, not pain in the ass white liberals on Twitter.
Ah, yes, the real Democrats, black people. So glad he let me know that. So what got Mr. Begala to this point? Take a look at how things started.
The fact is, no incumbent president who's had a significant primary challenge has won re-election. Right. Everyone knows that. So every establishment Democrat will say, look, and they'll be leaned on. They'll say, cannot run against Joe. So you know who might run if they actually have an open process? People are already outside of the establishment. Someone like Nina Turner, someone like Marianne Williamson. And if you have just a Nina Turner versus Joe Biden, Nina Turner ends up gathering a significant amount of support just ideologically. And the last thing the DNC is going to want is for Joe Biden to have to debate Nina Turner 6 times. So they'll shut that thing down.
They will shut that thing down. Jink, I'm gonna this is all you.
Might be all you. All right. First off, I didn't know you were a white liberal on Twitter. He says those are the only folks complaining, and that that those are the only folks who are not on board for the Democratic establishment. I didn't know I was a white liberal on Twitter. These are all things that I'm finding out from Paul Begala. I appreciate it. But Nina, he's going to the heart of the issue here. They know that if they can't protect the African American voting bloc, voting mainly for the establishment, and if we're being honest, that is an issue, right? Then his side of the party is toast, obliterated, right? And so what they're doing in furtherance of that is, no, Democrats, black Democrats in specific, must vote for the corporate candidate, the establishment candidate, the conservative Democrat, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, whoever else Paul Begala picks. And that quote by Joe Biden that we ran there is very telling. He's saying, if you're not voting for me, you're not black. Yeah. That has been the message of the Democratic establishment now for decades, because they're scared to death that African Americans will find out en masse about progressives. And if they do, this thing is over. They have no chance of winning inside Democratic primaries.
Yeah, thank Andrew Yang for just, whether it was my name, he named Marianne Williamson, but just naming progressives who are willing to stand up and fight. So Andrew there, Cenk, was just basically letting them know the math ain't mathing on this. It does sound a lot like the message to the African American community, unfortunately, is just obey or shut up and dribble. And so the African American community is going to have to recognize its power. We're gonna have to recognize our power and make some different demands. This, to be this predictable is very troubling to me. Congressman Ro Khanna chimed in this way.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't know, but we got it there. We did. And then we have one last roll of tape.
She was Bernie's co-chair. She's a former state senator from Ohio. We all know her well. Bernie won 9, count them 9. You were there, Andrew. 9 contests. Joe won 44. And I think Bernie maybe has more support than Nina. So bring it on. What the hell are you worried about? I mean, you're not a Democrat anymore, but I am. And as a guy who loves Joe Biden, that's fine. He'll steamroll any potential Democrat and then go on and beat Trump.
Bring it on. Jay, I'm gonna hand this over to you as much as I am chopping at the bit here, because I want you to explain to people what actually happened in the 2020 primary.
Yeah, so he says, well, only 9 out of 44 voted for Bernie. Now he knows how deeply misleading that is. He's basically lying to the audience, because after Super Tuesday, the election was basically over. So the rest of the states' votes were irrelevant. He knows that, but he puts that out in a deeply misleading way. Now, in reality, when the election was super tight in the beginning, it was the first 3 states that voted for Bernie Sanders. He won all 3 states. And that's when the establishment, people like Paul Begala, panicked. And they called in the big guns, Barack Obama and others, Jim Clyburn, obviously. And they had everyone kiss the ring of Joe Biden. So Klobuchar, Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Kamala Harris had already dropped out. But all of those establishment candidates bent a knee and said, okay, Joe Biden is gonna be our man, because whatever we do, it cannot be Bernie Sanders. Because if it's Bernie Sanders, he's actually going to give people higher wages and free healthcare. And our donors will be furious. So they all came in. But to me, all those guys piling on was actually secondary. The primary issue was mainstream media. So the Chris Matthews, the Chuck Todds all coming out and saying, oh my God, if Bernie Sanders wins, people are gonna get executed in Central Park. They called Bernie Sanders supporters brown shirts, even though Bernie had lost a huge percentage of his family in the Holocaust. They said the most loathsome things because corporate rule was actually being challenged. Bernie was on the precipice of winning when they all spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars in free media, piling on and trying to convince voters, whatever you do, do not think that you have an option. And the biggest lie that corporate media tells is that Democratic voters do not have a choice. Now that's half true. That's why it's easy to mislead people. In a general election, the Republicans are monsters, and you'd be nuts to vote for a Republican, right? But they say it in the primaries. But wait a minute, in the primaries, whether it's African Americans, Latinos, or anyone else that are Democratic voters, they have 2 choices. They can go with the corporate wing of the party that is currently in control, that, by the way, and we'll get to what they delivered or didn't deliver for you in a second. Or you can go with progressives. Progressive promise you higher wages, more healthcare. They care about the economy. They care about all these things that matter in your life. But on top of that, they would actually fight for you. So what did the establishment do? They said, oh, we're gonna give you voting rights. Of course, we're gonna give you voting rights. Did they deliver voting rights? Nothing, nothing, right? Exactly. And then they turn around and go, progressives are not democratic enough. I mean, corporate media, you goddamn liars, okay? We wanted voting rights. Progressives, if Bernie Sanders had won, there's no question that we would have voting rights for everyone in the country. We would definitely have $15 minimum wage. We would have higher wages for everyone. But the liars in mainstream media, corporate media, and the liars among the corporate Democrats like Paul Begala have told that lie 1,000 times on CNN and MSNBC.
And they will continue to tell that lie. And by the way, all of the things that the progressives are fighting for is actually what the majority of the American people want, no matter how they identify politically